Get ready for a clash of titans. We have Alexei Shirov with the white pieces against Vladimir Kramnik. Two legends of the game in a rapid-fire showdown, and the sharp opening they play does not disappoint. Shirov opens with the pawn to d4, and we get a Queen's Gambit declined Slav defense. Both players develop their knights classically, building a solid pawn structure in the center, a very standard, solid start. And now the gloves come off. White plays the sharp anti-Moran, pinning the knight with bishop to g5. Black immediately challenges with pawn pushes on the flank, and we have a wonderfully complex middle game on our hands. Shirov blasts open the center with the pawn to d5. A flurry of trades ensues, with pawns and knights exchanged in the middle of the board. The position is now wide open, dynamic, and still very much in the balance. Both players now rush to complete their development. White's knight hops into d4, the bishop recaptures on c4, and the rooks slide onto the open files. A tense maneuvering battle for control of the key lines begins. The final quiet moves before the storm. Both sides position their queens and rooks, building up pressure and preparing for the first critical moment of the game. Shirov makes his move, knight to f5. It's an aggressive leap, but it's an inaccuracy that gives black a huge opportunity to seize a winning advantage by capturing a piece. Kramnik naturally recaptures as the pawn takes the knight on f5, and Shirov follows up as his bishop takes the knight on d5. And this is the moment. Kramnik has a golden chance to punish White's aggression and win material. But he misses it. The correct path was to start with a trade of rooks. Rook takes rook on e1 with check. White must recapture. And now the killer blow, pawn to f4. White can give a spite check on f7, but after the king takes, black is simply winning material. But in the game, Kramnik plays the quiet knight to f6, and the massive opportunity is gone. The game is back to being roughly equal. White initiates a trade of rooks on the c-file, and black immediately recaptures on c8. A fantastic move from Shirov. Bishop takes bishop on b7 was the only move that keeps the balance, creating new problems for black's queenside structure. Kramnik is forced to recapture as the queen takes the bishop on b7. The pieces dance around the board, White's bishop lands on e5, the knight hops to e4, and after some queen maneuvering, black's bishop finds an active square on c5. Shirov plays the logical-looking bishop to d4, but this is a serious inaccuracy that gives black another winning chance. A much safer continuation was available. The rook slides to f1. Black continues with rook to e8. And now, bishop to d4 is fine. After queen to d5, the queen can drop back to b3, keeping everything under control. But back in the actual game, Shirov plays bishop to d4, and now black can land a tactical shot that would win material. And for the second time, Kramnik has a winning position. And for the second time, he lets it slip. The killer move here was a pawn break. Pawn to g4. After the bishops are traded on c5 and the knight recaptures, White's f5 pawn hangs, and the pawn push to f3 wins material for black. But incredibly, he misses it. Instead, Kramnik plays rook to d8, a passive move that completely lets Shirov off the hook. A huge mistake, and Shirov finds the only move. Queen to e3 is a brilliant response, capitalizing on black's error and immediately restoring equality. A fantastic defensive find. A tense maneuvering phase follows. The pieces shift, with bishops and queens probing for weaknesses. White's rook lifts to e2 and pawn advances to a3, keeping the position complex and balanced. And yet again, Kramnik misses the chance to create counterplay. The move knight to c5 is a misstep. The best try was to finally push that g-pawn. Pawn to g4, White takes. The knight leaps to g5. After another pawn trade, the knight jumps into f3 with check, and black wins a pawn. But in the game, the knight moves to c5, and now it's White who begins to seize the advantage. Shirov responds with the powerful queen to c3, centralizing his best piece, and another small slip from black. The knight moves to e8, which isn't the most accurate, ceding more and more control over to White. And now Shirov is in control. He methodically improves his position, restricting black's pieces with bishop to f6 and rook to d2, slowly tightening the screws. But Kramnik finds an excellent defensive resource. Queen to c5 is the only move, a brilliant find to challenge White's control and keep the game alive. The idea is to force a trade. If queen takes queen on c5, the bishop recaptures. And after pawn to b4, the bishop can drop back to f8, and black is still fighting. Wow! A brilliant pawn sacrifice from Shirov. Pawn to b4 is a stunning move that ignores the queen trade and blows the position wide open to his advantage. Kramnik has no choice but to accept the challenge, and the queen takes the queen on c3. And bishop takes queen on c3 is the perfect follow-up. A fantastic move that transitions into a completely winning endgame for white. This is masterful technique from Shirov. He brings his knight to e5, pushes the g-pawn, and finally invades with knight to d7. Black's position is collapsing, and in a desperate position, Kramnik makes the final blunder that ends the game. He had to try trading knights to relieve some pressure. Knight takes the knight on d7, the rook recaptures, and now rook to c8. After bishop to f6, the king steps to h7, and black can still resist. But instead, Kramnik plays rook to b6, a fatal mistake that walks right into a simple tactic and loses on the spot. And that's it. Shirov wins. Vladimir Kramnik resigned in this position because after that final blunder, the game is over. Here is the simple sequence that forces the win. The knight simply takes the rook on b6. Black recaptures with the bishop. The rook slides to d6, pinning the bishop. Black can throw in a desperate check on f2, but after the king takes, white is simply up a full piece with a completely winning position.